Wouldn't anybody care to meet a sweet old-fashioned girl? Scooby-Dooby-Dum, doesn't anybody care about a sweet old-fashioned pearl?
P.Z. Myers of the University of Minnesota has quite correctly observed, quote, "The fundamentalist Christian community has a strong interest, for some bizarre reason, in converting homosexuals into heterosexuals. The prospect of homosexuals becoming heterosexuals does seem to draw and dazzle many Christians. Of course, if the universe actually had an omnipotent and omnibenevolent divine sovereign for whom nothing was impossible and who took a dim view of homosexuality, a believer who discovered that he or she was homosexual could simply petition this all-powerful and all-good one, and voila, he or she would instantaneously become heterosexual. In fact, if this divine sovereign were truly omnipotent and omnibenevolent and had an issue with homosexuality, he, she, it, whatever, could simply prevent anyone from ever having a homosexual orientation. But that's not how it works in real life, as we all know. Facts notwithstanding, some Christians continue to indulge their bizarre fascination with converting homosexuals into heterosexuals, and in the process perpetuate the conversion myth and all that comes with it. It is out of this obsessed and delusional soil that the following news springs.
Announcement. The new study, conducted by researchers from Wheaton College and Regent University, was unveiled at the APA's 2009 convention. Over a 7-year period, the study observed a group of people who had sought help overcoming homosexual behavior from the Christian ministry Exodus International, and found a 53% success rate.
Stanton L. Jones, provost and professor of psychology at Wheaton College in Illinois, and Mark A. Yarhouse, professor of psychology at Regent University in Virginia, recently presented results of a study they conducted to the convention of the American Psychological Association. Their paper is entitled Ex-Gays, an extended longitudinal study of attempted religiously mediated change in sexual orientation. There's a link to the text of the paper to the right of the screen. In the paper, Drs. Jones and Yarhouse tell us that over a 7-year period, they, quote, studied a group of men and women seeking sexual orientation change through a religious ministry organization called Exodus International. An organization Drs. Jones and Yarhouse report that, quote, neither rejects homosexual persons nor embraces the gay identity as an acceptable norm. Drs. Jones and Yarhouse also report, quote, funding for this study was provided by 2 grants from Exodus. They further report, quote, we share roughly the same basic set of religious commitments as articulated by Exodus. At the risk of putting too fine a point on it, 2 Christian psychologists from the faculties of 2 of the most conservative evangelical colleges in the United States conducted a study of the success rate of Exodus International, which funded the study and with whose goals and religious commitments the 2 psychologists agree. Not exactly conditions that should have one on the edge of one's seat as to the results. In any case, Drs. Jones and Yarhouse report that 53% of their sample experienced, quote, some version of success. What does that mean? They either opted to be sexually inactive, 30%, or they experienced a, quote, conversion from homosexual to heterosexual orientation, 23%. The 53% figure has been traveling like wildfire through the Christian and Christian sympathetic media. Florida Baptist Witness study shows ex-gay ministry has 53% success rate. CBN News, owned by Pat Robertson, who also happens to be chancellor of Regent University. virtueonline.org, ex-gay ministry, has 53% success rate. freerepublic.com goes more broadly. Groundbreaking research on sexual orientation change. And we saw a bit of the piece from Coral Ridge Ministries earlier. I'd like to offer 3 observations about all of this. Observation 1. Since Drs. Jones and Yarhouse have presented a study about attempted religiously mediated change in sexual orientation, it is at best mendacious to claim that people who have merely stopped having sex have changed their sexual orientation. They haven't. If the study were about attempted religiously mediated change in sexual behavior, the sexually inactive would count. But behavior is not what the study purports to examine. Rather, its subject is sexual orientation. An abstinent homosexual is still a homosexual by orientation. So the 30% who opted for sexual inactivity cannot be truly deemed successful in the context of this study. Their sexual orientation did not change. This therefore eliminates the vast majority of the purported 53% success rate, leaving at most the 23% of the final sample population that claimed to experience a conversion from homosexual to heterosexual. Huge difference. Observation 2. The percentages are misleading when compared to the actual numbers of the sample population. This 7-year study began with a sample population of 98 people. Not the most substantial group, but there it is. By year 3, the sample population dropped by 25% to 73 people. By the end of the study, the population had decreased again, this time from 73 to 63 people. Ultimately, only 61 people were categorized, 4 of whom were non-responsive. This hardly seems a representative population from which significant conclusions can be drawn. So, more than 1/3 of the original sample population didn't make it to the end of the study. 37 people. That's more people than the combined total of people who opted for abstinence and who claim to have had a conversion in sexual orientation. In sum, this started out a small sample population, and it only got smaller as time went on. Observation 3. Back on page 8 of the paper is a statement that will never see the light of day in the Christian media. Quote, "The group that grew the most in absolute and proportional terms was failure." There was a 100% increase in the number of people in the sample population reporting a gay identity at the beginning and end of the study and who gave up the prospect of changing their sexual orientation. They comprise 20% of the final sample population. When combined with the rest of those who experienced little or no change in their sexual orientation, we end up with 77% of the final sample population experiencing little or no religiously mediated change in their sexual orientation. For Exodus International, a group that claims to help people achieve, quote, freedom from homosexuality through the power of Jesus Christ, a 77% failure rate, according to this study, is by any measure an embarrassingly poor result. Now, there's a good bit of spin coming from the psychologists who conducted this study and the Christian media trying to turn this into a victory for Exodus International, including Dr. Jones's complaints in interviews about, quote, strong and extraordinarily rigorous scientific standards, and his assertion that such standards are, quote, selectively, unquote, applied. This spin would be the envy of any top. Finally, for a comprehensive analysis of the claims by groups such as Exodus International, read the American Psychological Association Task Force's recent report about them. There's a link to the right of the screen. The chair of the task force summarized what was found. Quote, "At most, certain studies suggested that some individuals learned how to ignore or not act on their homosexual attractions." Change, huh? Thanks.